Hello. Okay, welcome to another Christmas special. Last year's was for the Santa Claus movie, and when it comes to deciding what I'm gonna review for the Christmas special, I decided to choose the Christmas movies that I grew up with as a kid watching, because there's that kind of nostalgic element to them. They are movies that when you watch these movies as a kid, they impact you in a way that kind of just stays with you, and they end up becoming these special moments in your life because they are movies that just captured my imagination, that just swallowed me up within their fantasy stories and the world. And like the Santa Claus movie was one of those. And sort of the most interesting thing about doing these reviews is going back to those movies that I grew up with, loving, and just sort of watching them now at a very different time in my life with a sort of slightly different perspective, even though I've still got that sort of nostalgia for those particular movies, these particular films. And so with that being said, it's Christmas Eve. I'm filming this review now on Christmas Eve, and I have decided this year to review Home Alone. It's one of the very first movies or a bunch of films that I had purchased for me as a Christmas present on VHS as a kid. And I remember owning this film on VHS for many, many years, and I would watch it over and over and over again, no matter what time of the year it was. I had so much fun with this film when I was a kid, and so it does hold a very special place in my heart. And so for those of you watching this video, watching this review, who have never seen Home Alone from 1990 before, the story follows Kevin McAllister, an 8-year-old boy played by Macaulay Culkin, who is accidentally left behind when his family goes on a Christmas vacation to Paris. Initially thrilled to have the house to himself, Kevin's excitement turns to fear when he discovers that two burglars, Harry and Marv, are planning to rob his home. So yeah, Home Alone, directed by Chris Columbus, who you might know from directing Mrs. Doubtfire, another movie that I love and I just grew up watching over and over again on VHS, as well as the first two Harry Potter movies. And Home Alone's also written by a John Hughes, who wrote a lot of comedies during the 80s. He directed The Breakfast Club for one. He also wrote Beethoven, and so I'm very familiar with that name. I haven't watched all of his work, whether it be writing or directing. So yeah, Home Alone, a movie that I had a hell of a lot of fun with as a kid, and so I recently revisited on 4K, and I had a really good time revisiting this movie. When it comes to the humour, the comedy within it, it has a very sort of traditional approach, I felt, when it comes to the humour. It's this sort of slapstick, sort of Looney Tunes type of humour, and you'll get it in sort of like, you know, the briefest of moments. Like it really truly comes to life within the last 45 minutes when you get the Marv and Harry sort of break into the house, and they got all these traps set up for them, and that's when the sort of the comedic side of the story really sort of comes to life. But you've also got it in moments before then, and there'll be like brief moments where Kevin is just walking down the street with his shopping and the bag split open, and it might be something like him walking down the street and Harry and Marv are following him down the street, and he turns around and they stop and they're just sort of staring or looking around, pretending that, you know, they're not doing anything. It's quite a silly sort of style of humour. But it's also very effective due to how they are constructed within those moments. Like there are moments where I proper barely laughed, and I think a lot of it's because I just haven't revisited this movie in such a long time, and so a lot of it sort of came flooding back to me while I was watching it. But at the same time, I'd forgotten how well constructed the humour was within this movie, but also how it's brought to life by the actors as well. You've got Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern here as Harry and Marv, and they really help sell that comedic aspect of this film. And like in those moments when they're in the van following Kevin and they just stop and they sort of stare around and to when they enter the house and get all the booby traps unleashed upon them. And, you know, there's a moment, one of the moments that kind of really made me laugh out loud last night while I was rewatching this, was the moment with the spider, the tarantula. Now, I'm fucking terrified of spiders, and it's the moment where Kevin picks up the tarantula and puts it on top of Marv's face, and he just lets out this almighty scream. And it is so funny, it's hysterical, and I just feel like, you know what, even though the sort of the humour is very silly, it's very animated and cartoon-like, at the same time it's very effective. Like, you don't really get humour like this anymore. They try to replicate humour like this in modern movies, but it's just not quite as effective. And I feel like it's when it's executed in sort of this way, when it is these sort of little pockets of moments within the story, I feel like that's kind of helps or aids in sort of how effective the humour is. And like I just said, the comedy within this movie works not just because of how it's constructed, but by also how it's brought to life by its cast. Macaulay Culkin as Kevin is fantastic here, as well as Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern as Harry and Marv. And it's why the humour within this movie works as much as, you know, why the humour is as effective as it is for me personally. And I just got to bring up another moment that really makes me sort of barely laugh, and it does it every single time. And again, it's a very brief moment, but it's a good example of sort of the type of humour within this film. And it's a moment in the kitchen within the first act. It's one of the very first scenes where you've got all the family together and they're all eating pizza, and Kevin gets into a fight with his brother, and by accident a family member, a little kid, gets jammed against the wall and a chair. And just the way in which that moment plays out, it is so brief. Watch it! And another aspect that I just really like about this story and about this film, and it's an aspect that I've grown to sort of really appreciate the older I've gotten and as I've sort of rewatched this movie over time, and it's that kind of how they tap into what it's like to be a kid and how that's explored throughout its story. Whatever it be, you know, wanting to do what the hell you want without having your mother or father telling you that you can't do this and you can't do that, and to just have your own freedom, to that kind of very overactive imagination where perhaps you might be afraid of something in a dark basement. Like, for example, it's this boiler in the basement here. And as a kid watching this particular moment, it used to scare me. And I never quite understood it. And it's not until I grew older that, you know, I understood what this moment was saying. And I had moments as a kid where I used to be afraid of the dark and sort of walking up a dark section of my stairs in the house. And then I'll always remember a moment where my imagination would just sort of create this entity in the shadows. There wasn't nothing there, it was just my imagination just going wild. But it's just something that this film taps into that really sort of just takes me back now to being a kid again. And so I feel like there are aspects of this movie, aspects of the story that I appreciate more now than I did back when I was a kid. And another aspect of this movie that I've grown to really appreciate and sort of grow fond of as I've grown up with this movie over time is the addition. And I'm going to say addition because it's a aspect of a character's story and background that was added by Chris Columbus to add that extra layer of emotion and heart to the story. And that last minute addition to the story was involving the character of Old Man Marley. And it's a character that adds so much heart to this movie to the point where I just wish we had a little bit more of him. But you've got this really nice, tender, emotional moment in the church just as we are transitioning into the third act, and it's a moment where you've got Marley sort of talking to Kevin and explaining sort of, you know, the fact that he doesn't talk to his son anymore, and just this dynamic between the two characters within this moment, you know, brought to life beautifully by both performances, just creates a very effective moment when it comes to sort of adding that extra layer of emotion to this story. To be honest, what they are exploring within this movie when it comes to sort of the deeper themes around loneliness and isolating yourself from friends and family over whatever it may be, whether it be foods, I feel like that kind of very deeper theme there, that very kind of human sort of emotion or experience sort of really comes to life or comes together in this particular moment. And you've got this kid telling a grown man to just speak to his son. It's like roles reversed. It's like, actually, who is the kid here? Who's the one being childish? And I just think it's a very clever, sweet, tender moment that's very effective. And, you know, for me personally, one of those themes that I believe is there buried within the story sort of really just comes together beautifully within this one moment. I do wonder that if Chris Columbus hadn't added this character and sort of this character's story into the movie, would it have been as wholesome and as satisfying as it was, you know, when you get to the conclusion? I don't know. And I for me personally, you know, and having sort of knowing that this was an addition to the story by Chris Columbus, the director, is it an conclusion that if we didn't have it within the movie, would it have been as effective as it is? I don't know. And upon revisiting this movie last night, I discovered that actually the first two acts of this movie are actually quite ponderous and clunky in how sort of it plays out. And for me, it was much more prominent last night while watching it. And I don't know if it's because I found myself sort of just waiting for that last 30 minutes of the movie with Harry and Marv trying to get it, you know, break into the house. I just found myself waiting for that final act. And as a result, sort of as I was watching this movie, that kind of the first two acts, even though it has pockets of moments that I like, and, you know, there are moments that really make me laugh and I just enjoy in how certain moments are constructed. As it flows, the narrative flows, I found it to be quite clunky. But at the same time, it didn't do anything to my enjoyment of the overall experience. I still had a really good time with this movie. And one of the first things I uttered while rewatching this movie last night, it was actually before I pressed play, it was during the menu, and you've got John Williams, you know, classic score there playing, and John Williams is a master. I mean, he's one of my favourite composers of all time, and he has a very distinct sound to him, again, very traditional sort of style of composing music, and that kind of fits into this movie. To be honest with you, John Williams sort of fits into any kind of Chris Columbus movie, because even Chris Columbus as a director has a very traditional style to how he crafts his films. But the music in this movie is just magical. It's a beautiful, beautiful score that truly sort of captures the magic and warmth of Christmas. I fucking love the score in this movie. And, you know, John Williams' score accompanied with a shot towards the end where, you know, you've got Christmas Day and it's snowing and you've got this big American house and it's like a fucking Christmas card come to life. Like, it is amazing. And so, yeah, you know, as I've grown older, like I've said, you know, I have noticed more the flaws within this movie, a movie that I hold very close to my heart due to that attachment I've got to it. It was one of the very first VHSs I ever had, among a few others, you know, with Jurassic Park and Star Wars: A New Hope. You know, Home Alone was one of those VHSs that I had in my collection, and was a movie that I grew up with watching over and over again. You know, now I recognise that, you know, there are flaws, especially during the first two acts. For me, it's a little bit clunky, and even more now than ever, it sort of makes you kind of really sort of waiting for that final act where, you know, you get the fun really, with Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, who are both absolutely fantastic here and sell the humour and sort of the comedic aspect of its story. And you've got to mention the stunts as well. I think the stunts in this film are incredible. Like, it all happens within the frame. And, you know, when you read up behind, what went on behind the scenes and how they crafted those moments, it's incredible. But again, it's good old-fashioned traditional filmmaking, and it's just, you know, great to see this type of filmmaking, because it even though it's silly, it's over the top, it's comedic, it's cartoon-like, it still very much feels real due to how sort of these moments are brought to life. I mean, there were even moments while I was watching it last night where it left me wondering, like, wow, fuck, how did they actually achieve that? How did they do that again? And I miss that aspect about watching movies. I miss sort of sitting there and thinking, wow, like, how on earth did they do that? Like, wow, that looks really good. It looks like it hurt, but I mean, how did they get around that? I mean, I just miss that aspect. So yeah, enough rambling on from me. I've enjoyed revisiting Home Alone, and I've enjoyed sharing my thoughts on it with you guys, my channel. Like I said, you know, when it came to sort of choosing what Christmas movie I was going to review this year, for me, I felt like it's important to really sort of go back to those movies that I grew up watching as a kid, and not so much really the most recent Christmas films. And so Home Alone is one of those, and if you've not seen it before, then I highly recommend you do check it out. It does have a sequel. I say a sequel because for me this movie only has got one sequel, and that is Home Alone 2, which I think I like more than most people, but it's a film that I've not watched in an awful long time. It's very much the same film but different setting, but maybe that's a review for next year maybe. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Home Alone, and I will be giving Home Alone a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that's it for my 2024 Christmas special, my review of Home Alone. But what do you guys think of 1990s Home Alone? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I have got a hell of a lot of videos planned in over the next couple of weeks. I've got a top 10 anticipated movies of 2025 on the way, my top 10 movies, my top 10 favourite movies of 2024, and you've got the most recent cinema release of Mufasa, The Lion King, the prequel to one of my favourite animated movies of all time. You've also got Sonic 3 that I want to squeeze in as well. And yeah, so a lot planned, and I just want to, as I always do at the end of these videos, just say a big thank you to everyone that connect to my channel, whether it be liking or even disliking or commenting and subscribing. It means an awful lot, and it will always overwhelm me that so many of you already do want to follow just some random Welsh geek talk about film and TV. It just means an awful lot, but I love doing this, and I'm just looking forward to growing my channel into 2025 with you guys sort of following me on that journey and just allowing me to share my passion, which is film and TV, with like-minded people. So yeah, look, enough rambling on from me. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I want to wish every single one of you a Merry Christmas.